So most of you are familiar with the Halo series and the protagonist John 117, the Spartan known as Master Chief. Well, in this video we're going to explore exactly what a Spartan is, including the dark history and exactly how they're created.
Welcome to Digital Bestiary, where I talk about interesting lore and backstories from various video games, and if that's something you're into, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel for more content.
So the Spartans, with their heroic nature and their involvement in the military, started out far from what it is in its current state. Back in the year 2321, the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, which is a military branch in the UNSC, or United Nations Space Command, created the Orion project, named after the Greek mythological hero Orion. The purpose of the Orion project was to create super soldiers, which was basically humans that were stronger, faster, and could outperform any soldier before them. In its early stages, the Orion project team just wanted to see what they were actually capable of with their current technology. And at the time, the only people being tested on were members of the military who willingly volunteered to enter the program. After they chose a handful of candidates for the project, they were put through numerous tests and augmentations for the whole duration of the project. But the end results were nowhere near what they wanted to achieve, so the candidates were seeded back into the regular chain of command and the Orion project was declared ineffective and terminated. But 170 years later, so in the year 2491, the Orion project was relaunched in secret by the Colonial Military Administration. This was due to the fact that the civil war among the humans had been raging and the UNSC was finding it difficult to manage, along with maintaining control of their own assets. The headquarters for this project was located on one of the many orbital docks on planet Reach, a human colonized world very similar to Earth. The goal for the project was same as before. They wanted to create super soldiers by augmenting selected members of the military who volunteered. Except this time around they felt like they had learned from their previous mistakes and were better equipped with more advanced augmentation techniques. Originally there were 65 test subjects who volunteered, but by the end of the very rigorous, intense training, an additional 100 soldiers joined, making the total head count up to 165. 5 years after the relaunch of Orion, it was finally time for their first mission, Operation Charlemagne. They would deploy a full unit of Orion soldiers to recover a suborbital transit station over Eridanus II. The mission was a success with only 1 casualty and 0 detection from the enemy. The huge success of this mission sparked stories, conspiracy theories, and media speculation across the galaxy. Everyone was curious about these new super soldiers in action. For a solid 10 years, the Orion project remained in operation, and with quite a bit of success. But the performance of the soldiers was still far from what the scientists had hoped to reach, and the cost of running the program at full force was far too much to achieve. So in the year 2506, the Orion project was once again shut down and the soldiers were reassigned into various special operations units. The years following the deactivation of the Orion project were not so great for the UNSC. Engagements with insurrectionists or human rebels against the UNSC were beginning to be far too much to handle. The rebels became more efficient with their attacks, requiring the military to be more forceful against them, and it was a bad situation for everyone involved. So in the year 2511, Orion Generation 2 was initiated as the answer to end the widespread rage of the rebels. I mean, hopefully the third time is the charm, right? This time, Dr. Catherine Halsey, a scientist who was a key advisor for ONI, had new goals and radical changes in mind for the project. The goals were pretty straightforward. One was to create a group of elite soldiers to subdue insurrectionists in their early stages without any military casualties. The second was to also minimize civilian casualties and avert the Civil War. The third and final goal was to substantially reduce the cost of all this, which was a big problem in the past. This time around, the subjects could no longer be military volunteers. They were selected through a gene pool with an age restriction protocol. They must also possess superior physical and mental attributes, and they must be moldable to be instilled with the military values and to understand war, which in their eyes couldn't be taught to enlisted soldiers. So controversially, this narrowed candidates down to children. children who would be raised as war machines from a young age. The next radical difference in this new project was the integration of the armor onto the participants. The new type of armor serves as sort of a powered exoskeleton with an immense amount of protection. But in order for it to work properly, the candidate themselves would have to be augmented, turning them into human guinea pigs since this had never been done before. But despite the risk and unethical means of creating soldiers, the Gen 2 Orion project was given the green light by Oni. They thought the good that would come from the project would far outweigh the controversy and negative effects. Sometime during the early stages of the program, Dr. Halsey wasn't satisfied with the name Orion Generation 2, as she saw the new project as something far better that couldn't be linked to the failures of the past. So she renamed it the Spartan II project. They were initially granted funding for 300 candidates, but that was later reduced by half by the year 2517, so 150 candidates had been chosen through DNA gathered by an after-school vaccination program for the outer colonies. A free program to get children vaccinated while the military secretly gathered their DNA. And if you think that's bad, it gets even worse. Funding restrictions ultimately narrowed the candidates down to 75 boys and girls around the age of 6. The program had to be kept in secret, so all 75 children were kidnapped from their families and replaced with flash clones in the middle of the night. Now, flash cloning at the time was primarily only used to quickly create organs and body parts to replace old or damaged ones in humans, so the clones would actually all die shortly after, since they weren't at all meant to be functional. Dr. Halsey later said that she used the clones as a way to give families closure by making them think their children died instead of going missing. After being kidnapped and sedated, the children were all taken to Planet Reach to begin their training, led by Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez and an AI named Deja. All the candidates were given numbers to combine with their first name, while their last name or family names were completely discarded. In the FleetCom military complex on Reach, the Spartans went through a very difficult first few years, with training and situations that would push them all beyond their limits. Along with the training, they were also given high-level education in math, science, history, reading, writing, and military tactics. Along with their peak physical and mental training, Officer Mendez also wanted to make sure to teach the young Spartans about respect, honor, and the differences between right and wrong. During this time, young Spartan John 117, who we know now as Master Chief, rose to be the top performer of the group. Officer Mendez trained these Spartans up until the year 2525, when the young 14-year-olds would now go through the toughest part of their training, the biological augmentation procedures. This involved 5 separate surgical procedures, each with their own risks. A capillary reversal procedure to increase the blood flow to the retina for overall better vision. This had an 11% risk of causing complete blindness. The grafting of carbide to every single bone in the human body, creating them unbreakable, with a 4% chance of failure that would cause the Spartans' bones to pulverize beyond repair. A platinum pellet that would be placed into their left thyroid gland, slowly releasing a growth hormone that targets muscle and bone structures, resulting in the Spartans' massive size. This came with a 2% risk of the patient developing elephantitis. Muscular enhancement injections giving the Spartans superhuman strength, with a 5% chance of a fatal heart attack. And finally, an alteration to neural activity, which dramatically increased reflexes, intelligence, memory, and creativity. This gave the patient a 12% risk to contract Parkinson's disease and Fletcher's syndrome. With such an intense procedure, 30 out of 75 Spartans were killed during the process. 12 others would be crippled and washed out of the program, sent out to join Oni instead. Only 33 survived without deformities, 2 of which ended their own lives after stumbling across their flash clones. With the 31 successful Spartan candidates ready for action, humankind had a new threat on the horizon: the Covenant. War broke out between humans and the alien races, which were far superior to the insurrectionists the Spartans were planned to face. The Spartans were repurposed and training was rushed into final phase, Project Mjolnir, named after the new armor they would all be fitted with to combat this alien threat. The Spartans, fitted with the most advanced armor that mankind has ever used, were very successful at eliminating all kinds of Covenant threats. The existence of the Spartans were also made public in hopes to boost morale in the UNSC. The Covenant would come to fear the presence of Spartans, often referring to them as demons upon their arrival. But even though the UNSC and Covenant both saw these super soldiers as being invincible, they were not. The Covenant War had many Spartan casualties, and after nearly a 30-year war, there were only 16 known Spartans who had survived. However, in order to keep Spartans invincible in the eye of the public, every Spartan lost in combat is actually listed as missing in action, or MIA, instead of KIA. During the war, however, a new Spartan program was launched in hopes of pushing the tides of war into their favor, the Spartan III program, which was even more controversial than the Spartan II project. The Spartan III project was designed to make super soldiers faster at a cheaper cost, with a much lower rate of survival. These soldiers would be deployed into very high-risk missions in secret from the public. The Spartan III candidates were once again children, but instead of being kidnapped, they would be picked up volunteers from orphanages. The Covenant attacks were a great motivator for willing volunteers. The candidates were trained on planet Oryx by Lieutenant Commander Kurt Ambrose. Instead of the high-tech Mjolnir armor, Spartan IIIs were given semi-powered infiltration armor, which is much cheaper and less advanced. Due to the very high-risk missions, Spartan IIIs who survived 2 or more missions would be dubbed headhunters, a special operation unit sent in when other means weren't successful. Finally, the last Spartan program and the current one in use, the Spartan IV project. This was created in the year 2553 by Musa-096, a Spartan II candidate who was crippled in the augmentation process. Spartan IV candidates, like the original Orion project, were willing adults who volunteered to enter. Augmentation of adults is now possible through technology advancements. Like the Spartan IIs, they were also given advanced Mjolnir armor, which was now mass-produced through private companies. Each Spartan serves in the new Spartan Operations branch in the UNSC. Unlike typical military chain of command, Spartans were each given their own framework based on their own set of skills. So with Spartan IIs being kidnapped children in the middle of the night, and Spartan IIIs being pumped out to be sent out to die, who knew something that brings so much hope to humankind can have such a dark backstory? Let me know if you guys want more Halo lore or any other video game lore. Just let me know down below in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content. I will catch you guys in the next one, and as always, good luck and have fun.